end to its self-imposed suspension of nuclear and long-range missile testing. He also gave a warning of a, quote, new strategic weapon that may be revealed in the near future. The North Korean leader had previously promised a so-called Christmas gift to the United States, raising concerns of a possible weapons test around the holidays. Joining me now is Msnbc Global Affairs contributor, former Ambassador Wendy Sherman. Ambassador, thanks for being with us here on New Year's Day. I want to ask you about Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who was asked about Kim Jong-un's comments and whether this was a turning point between the United States and North Korea. He was on CBS last night, and I want to play that.
If Chairman Kim has reneged on the commitments he made to President Trump, that is deeply disappointing. I was there when Chairman Kim made the commitment that said he would not engage in intercontinental ballistic missiles or test firing of their nuclear weapons, testing their nuclear weapon systems. He made those commitments to President Trump in exchange for President Trump agreeing not to conduct large-scale military exercises. We've lived up to our commitments. We continue to hold out hope that he'll live up to his as well.
All right, so you have been to Pyongyang. You've been involved with talks with leadership there and can sense the dynamic. Is this current standstill between the United States and North Korea any different than the past stalemates?
Well, I think what's different here is that Kim Jong-un has played the president like a Stradivarius violin. He has used the time in the photo ops to gain credibility internationally, while at the same time gaining time to continue to develop his weapons, and indeed probably does have a new strategic weapon, at least on its way to reality. Though I think what's important here, Francis, is two things. One, Kim Jong-un is signaling that he's still open to diplomacy, though what his objectives are is to reduce the sanctions or get rid of them entirely, whereas the president's objective is denuclearization, which isn't going to happen anytime soon. And secondly, Kim Jong-un is watching what's happening in the rest of the world with China, in Iraq, with Iran. And all of that says to him that the President of the United States is in a much weaker position.
Yeah, well, given that we have the president's former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, who just tweeted, I don't know if you've read this, since it was just tweeted in the last hour that the United States should fully resume all canceled or downsized military exercise in South Korea, hold congressional hearings on whether U.S. troops are truly ready to fight tonight. What's your take on that?
My take is John Bolton is being John Bolton. He has never seen a war he didn't want to wage. That is true where Iran is concerned. That is true where North Korea is concerned. He believes in force. He doesn't believe in any kind of arms control agreement. So John Bolton is just being John Bolton. Whether it has an impact on a president who really doesn't want to send more troops abroad, but does want to look like a tough guy, remains to be seen.
Yeah, given that and the way you put it, playing like a violin, I'm not familiar with the types of violin being played here. Given that, you know, you have North Korean state media that wrote about Kim Jong-un's comments saying that, quote, the world will witness a new strategic weapon to be possessed by the DPRK in the near future. What's the next step? The United States is being played, as you put it here. What does the United States need to do that's not already being done?
I think the United States needs to be engaged in vigorous diplomacy. Steve Biegun, who was the special envoy, and I assume still is now on his way to be Deputy Secretary of State. He's a capable person. He hasn't been able to really get any traction with the North Koreans. So diplomacy, the president should say, well, I hear what you're saying inside your language, that you're open to diplomacy. Let's get that underway. But it shouldn't be at the presidential level, Francis. It should be the hard work to get a negotiation going. And secondly, if the president on January 15th is going to announce the first phase of a trade deal with China, he should use his leverage with China to get China to intervene and to ensure that diplomacy gets underway. The president, the Secretary of State have a lot of crises on their plate. North Korea, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Middle East, Syria, Yemen, many things going on here in Hong Kong. Hong Kong, the protests this morning with more tear gas being hurled at those protesters. It's a tough time. Venezuela, I could go on and on. Diplomacy is really what we should be doing, but it's hard to do that when the State Department has been undermined, when senior foreign service officers have been sent out of the State Department, when we've reduced our footprint and our alliances around the world.
Yeah, I wish we could go across every single country when it comes to foreign diplomacy that we're talking about here, but specifically because it's been our headlines for the past 2 days. What is the United States? Where do we go from here when it comes to the attack at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad?
Well, look, we're in a really, really difficult place. Iraq is never easy. There isn't a government, as your earlier guest said, that's really stood up and solid and stable. It's in our interest to have a stable government. We should have done two things, had more conversation with the Iraqi leadership before we took the retaliatory strike. We should have made sure that was proportional. I'm not sure that it was. And we should have, in fact, reinforced our embassy or assumed that there might be protests, because the government does not control the militias inside of Iraq, particularly the Iranian-supported militia. But really, Francis, this goes back to a really strategic decision that the president made to withdraw from the Iran nuclear agreement. That put the hardliners in Iran in charge. They have done more malign behavior throughout the region as a result. This is just the escalatory moment. We need to get back in to a diplomatic stance and try to work our way. We had really aligned with Iran in Iraq to defeat ISIS. Now that ISIS's footprint is largely gone, we need to figure out what our next chapter is, and there really is not a strategic concept that this administration has put forward.
Ambassador